मॉरल लर्नर्स पेश करते हैं द मुरब्बी सीरीज। इस हफ्ते मुलाकात कीजिए माहिर तालीम और सेंटर फॉर इस्लामिक थॉट एंड एजुकेशन ऑस्ट्रेलिया के सीनियर रिसर्च फेलो डॉक्टर नदीम मेमन से।
बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम। अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह रब्बिल आलमीन अर्रहमानिर्रहीम मालिक यौमिद्दीन इय्याका नअबुदु व इय्याका नस्तईन इहदिनस सिरातल मुस्तकीम सिरातल लज़ीना अनअमता अलैहिम गैरिल मग़दूबि अलैहिम वलद्दाल्लीन आमीन। तमाम सामिईन और नाज़रीन को अस्सलामु अलैकुम व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहू। हम हाजिर हैं आज फिर अपनी मुरब्बी सीरीज के साथ, और हमेशा की तरह आज भी हम आपका तारुफ कराएंगे, आपकी मुलाकात कराएंगे एक माहिर तालीम के साथ, एक मेंटोर के साथ, जिनकी जिंदगी जो है वो इस दश्त के सहरा में गुजरी है, और वन ऑफ द रिनोन स्कॉलर्स स्पेशली इन एजुकेशन साइंस, डॉक्टर नदीम मेमन साहब। डॉक्टर नदीम, अस्सलामु अलैकुम व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहू।
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, very well, very well.
I hope if we'll go bilingual, it will be easy for you, or you can understand Urdu?
Urdu, I can understand. You'll forgive me if I don't speak in Urdu, just so I don't embarrass myself.
No worries, no worries, no worries, no worries, no worries. No, we'll give you a chance. No worries. And but also, you also forgive it if we ask something in Urdu, and it might give you some problem to understand. So you can easily ask if anything. I first
Sure.
introduce my renowned guest. He has done PhD from University of Toronto, Education Policies, and a Senior Research Fellow, School of Education, University of South Australia, and he's the author of two renowned books: Philosophy of Islamic Education, Discipline, Devotion, Dissent in Jewish, Catholic, and Islamic Schools, Director of Education, Islamic Teachers Education. So many our Islamic school teachers are students all over the world who have studied with him. MashaAllah, he's a very renowned, and also one of the few people in Muslim Ummah who has done a lot of work on curriculum policies, and he has done, mashallah, multi-diversified experience. He been in Canada, he been in Australia, and also in Morocco. He has done a lot of work for education policies implementation, and he knows the challenges of Ummah. So what we will do, we will try to get benefit, especially in terms of Pakistan. We'll more focus, and without wasting any time, Dr. Nadeem, I'll go straight to my first question, which so many of my audiences, they have asked already. That what do you feel in your experience, or in your as per academia background, that a single unified curriculum for a nation is beneficial, or it could be at different tiers as per language, ethnic background, demographics, or we see, especially in third world countries where elites have their own curriculum, they have own schools, and they have their own regime. What do you feel?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First off, Mufti Saab, Jazakallah khairan for the invitation, for the opportunity to be here. It's an honor, and it's humbling to be acknowledged and to be invited. So I really appreciate that. In terms of national curriculum, I think, look, national curriculum have benefits, significant benefits in providing standards that can provide consistency across schools. And that's one of the major sort of the impetus for establishing national curriculum, is to create that sense of consistency, to create that sense of standard across the diverse types of schools we have. The challenge is when standards become standardization, when we require things to be done the exact same way. And as long as national curriculum allow for the flexibility of implementation, they can be very powerful tools, like educational policy, and like curriculum, textbooks, anything that's become standard. If it allows for flexibility in implementation, it can be very powerful. If it mandates that everyone does the exact same thing in the exact same way, irrespective of the local needs and contexts of the individual schools, then it takes away the opportunities for creativity and innovation within our own school context. So, for example, if you have in schools in Pakistan, you have obviously different types of schools. If you expect the same standards for every school, then it takes away the essence, the distinction of, let's say, a madrasa from a state school, from an independent private school, from an international curriculum school. It takes away its ingenuity.
My question is, when you are saying that it has to be a flexibility in a unified curriculum, so what particularly you are talking about flexibility? Flexibility in changing of books, in changing of methodology, in changing of teaching methodology, or because flexibility is very subjective terminology. What measurable term you are using that it has to be flexibility, not particular standard? I do agree with you, because it has to be different. People have a different resources, different things, their ground realities are different, so it has to be flexibility. But what you feel that this type of flexibility should be there in curriculum, unified curriculum?
Well, I'll give you an example. Oftentimes, when you have a standardized curriculum, a national curriculum, it comes with a national entrance exam, let's say standardized tests of some sort. So you measure students on a standardized test based on a standardized curriculum. Now, if you measure them on a standardized test, you're going to require standardized textbooks to take them on that journey to the standardized curriculum. So everything then becomes standard. And what ends up happening is every teacher, regardless of where they're teaching, starts teaching to the test. And everything else that's important to that school no longer is important, right? So I'll give you the example in, let's say, in Canada or the United States in particular. There's been a real emphasis, Canada or United States, but even Australia, there's been a real emphasis on literacy and numeracy, basic foundational literacy and numeracy, right? Now, what literacy and numeracy means is they want to ensure a basic level of reading comprehension, writing, math skills that every child would leave with across all grades. So there's a standardized curriculum, a standardized test, and therefore standardized ways of teaching and methodology, right? What that ends up doing is that everyone is learning in the same way. Let's take literacy, for example. So we're all learning a phonics-based approach to reading, which really takes away the creativity around a love for reading, of just reading books in general, a deep comprehension for reading versus basic literacy, right? So if the expectation is that we're all going to teach literacy, you remove the creativity that schools can have in how they approach the same topic, the same subject.
So, means that you are saying that the biggest danger is that everybody comes with this result oriented culture, and everybody just running around, just getting the results, the best results, that they're working for the test, that they can appear in exam, they can guess the best result without, and sometime they will bypass the major topics also of the same subject, just because that they want to get the results in uh, state exams or international exams. That is a danger which you are seeing, that if we make something very particular standardization. That's
Absolutely.
what.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So along with this one, the same question arises, especially a country like a Pakistan, where we do have a national language which is Urdu, but our official language is English, unfortunately. And but what do you suggest now? Flexibility, especially in terms of languages, like for example, and what do you have experience, or what do you feel as being educationist, that how many languages could be taught in, especially in primary till age 12, and then till age 16, and then later on, one language, two language, three languages, how many languages we can teach student? Like for
Well,
example, in a Muslim ummah in Pakistan, we are focusing more, we thinking, we could be wrong, I'm asking a question from you, I'm just throwing a question, that we think Urdu is important, Arabic is important being a Muslim ummah, and English is important because it's an international language. Now, if these are the three languages, how you will suggest that, on which age group, which language should be taught?
yeah, the language question is a complicated one and an important one, because language it defines who we are. It's our identity, and as you rightfully mentioned, Urdu is extremely important as part of our heritage and our identity. Um, Being from Pakistan, English is important as a global language, and to give us global mobility. And Arabic is extremely important as part of our Islamic identity. So all three are critical. And I think education systems that teach multiple languages, uh, granted, it might be a little bit more complex, but at the same time, it has major benefits in a stronger sense of identity for the young people. And at a young age, we know that language acquisition is much stronger for young people. So to be teaching multiple languages from a young age in the early years makes complete sense. And then at some stage, determining when that can become optional, whether students decide to specialize and do higher studies in language acquisition or not, can be an option. And I think there are models out there. I'm not very familiar with the different models, but I know there are models out there in different schooling contexts in different countries where there are multiple languages being taught.
They have on Australia a lot that language other than English. Like for example, you can teach Arabic, or you can teach French, or any other languages. But my question is that particularly, that do you think that we, like for example, this question is coming in Pakistan unified curriculum nowadays. Debate is going on, and this question multiple times. This question comes that what should be language of teaching, English, Urdu, could be, and which subjects should be taught in which language. Now this question is coming, and which age group, for example, grade 1 till grade 3 Urdu, and then after the transaction will come, and or which age group we should make transition, or straight away we teach science in English, social studies in English, maths in English, and the other subjects in Urdu. So what do you feel, any type of segregation in terms of language, this thing?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't think I have enough of a understanding of the context in Pakistan, in the educational context, to comment on the specifics of what age and which subject should be taught in Urdu or English. I know it's a debate, and I know it's probably an important debate, but I think you probably have plenty of local scholars and educators that would be far better versed in speaking to that.
What was your experience in Morocco in terms of this one? What how they teach in normally the other subjects in Arabic or in English, or how do you feel, or French?
My in Morocco, it was, from what I recall, it was you had different schools. You had English speaking schools, French speaking schools, and Arabic speaking schools. And as parents, you would decide which school you wanted to go to. I don't recall, as far as I
All
know,
three have the
schools
same standards.
I don't recall. I taught in the higher education sector in Morocco, so I'm not sure
Okay.
how the K-12 sector worked over there.
Okay. Now another question, which is especially is all about teaching, and which is your science, and that is there's a debate with there are teacher-centric education system or student-centric education system. Now, what do you feel that which subjects should be taught as teacher-centric and which should be student-centric, and what are the dangers if we just mix it? Like which subject should be taught as a teacher-centric, we make it student-centric, and which could be student-centric, we make it the teacher-centric, or we just mix it. Well, what do you feel that whether this is a question which we should focus, or we just leave it this one?
No, it's a very important question, and I don't think it's an either or. I don't think you can do learner-centered teaching in the absence of teacher-centered, and you can't really do teacher-centered learning in the absence of having the learners involved. So I think it has to be a combination. I think it has to be a combination, but I think it also begins a lot with the overarching teaching philosophy, the principles of teaching that matter. And I think, in my own work, I've spoken a lot about the fact that we need to put more emphasis on the way that we teach than what we teach. And there's been a lot of focus on curriculum, standardizing curriculum, even in my work in particular, working with Islamic schools globally. When I work with Islamic schools, we often speak about the fact that Islamic schools would be much better if we just had better curriculum, better textbooks. And I say we're missing the point. The essence of teaching in the Islamic tradition is really this series. It's being Murabbi, and being a Murabbi begins with acknowledging that we ourselves don't feel ready to be calling ourselves Murabbi. Right? If a Murabbi sees themselves as a Murabbi, that's a problem. So, and what that entails, the essence of what that entails, that whether you're a parent or an educator or an imam, or you're part of the ulema, you're a scholar, is you never feel finished. You never feel like you've quite accomplished anything. A PhD doesn't matter, and a alim course doesn't really matter. It means that you're constantly learning, and that attitude, I think, is an essential attitude that crushes and challenges this dichotomy between teacher-centered and learner-centered. Because if a teacher doesn't see themselves as a teacher, but sees themselves as a learner, and if a learner doesn't see themselves as just a learner, but somebody who's also teaching, then you really shift the balance between this debate. I have Abid Saab remembers I have a 4-year-old son now, and the other day he came from school, and he said and his teacher said to me, he said, Luqman taught us the difference between crocodiles and alligators, and I never knew the difference. So I said to the teacher, I said, absolutely not. I said, you have certain things the teacher needs to know, and the teacher has certain things that you need to know. I said, do you know how to read? And he said, no. And I said to him, but you know what the difference between crocodiles and alligators, and your teacher didn't know the difference. So it was a moment where he said, oh, okay, I understand now. And I said to him, what I'm trying to explain to you is that each of us has something to contribute, but you have to have a respect for your teachers, recognizing that they know more than you, and they would have a respect for you and recognizing that there's still things that they don't understand and you might know. And that to me is the essence of being a Murabbi. That changes the way we think about education, and it's very rooted. It's essential in our Islamic tradition. I mean, this is something that our ulema know far better than I would. I'm just an educator on the side that's trying to understand our tradition of teaching and learning. But hopefully that helps answer your question. But I think whether we're talking about public schools, state schools, or Islamic schools, madrasas, the most important thing we can be doing as a sector of education sector is to be thinking about our pedagogy, the way that we teach, the philosophy that we bring to our education, and to rupture this dichotomy between teacher-centered and student-centered, and to start thinking about our roles as educators, what we bring.
Good. Very good insights, and really, yeah, I do agree with you at this point that actually the teachers has to be Murabbi, but they don't call themselves Murabbi because self accreditation is not the accepted model, because you self accredit yourself, self acknowledge in the manner. And you rightly pointed out, in Madaris still you can see there are several traditional Madaris. What the methodology they have. The student make his lesson in the morning, and he has to teach initially, and they just teacher, they just approve or add some point if he missed out, but he has to prepare a lesson, he has to come with a complete preparation of lesson. And
Mm,
yes, but the most important thing which we need a big heart, because we have to
mm,
appreciate the student. Yes, well
mm.
done, good job, that you really,
Yeah.
and that appreciation and that level of tolerance, and the same thing, making this balance that student also respect, not start criticizing, but also simultaneously respect. With respect, he accept from teacher, also teacher with respect and with dignity and with empathy, he accept from the student also. Jazakallah.
Mm,
So now another important question which was coming on a screen also, that teaching is a very natural thing, and why don't we keep teaching natural? What makes it sophisticated science when it used to be a nature? Why you are making so complicated this type of pedagogy and different difficult names you are using, hard to digest, hard to understand? Why not you make it simple, natural, simple, easy thing? You people are making so complicated things. Do you
yeah.
agree with
It's
the
it's
point?
it's a good point. Teaching is very natural, but I think we've become so distant from what's natural, um, that it requires us to think about um, it as a science. And the reason why is because we live in a very complex world where things are not the same, and the way that we teach is not the same. It's not going to be the same, and we won't have the same values or perspectives as the next person. So, what makes it a science is being able to define where we come from, what our values are in education. Um, I'll give you an example. Let's say you're teaching in a madrasa and you're teaching Quran. Now, I'm a parent and I want to walk into a school and decide whether this madrasa is good for my child. Now, some madrasas will teach, the emphasis will be on the memorization of the Quran. Other madrasas, the emphasis will be on understanding the Quran, comprehension. Other madrasas will be on the study of hadith and the seerah, the Prophet ﷺ. Others might be on contemporary issues and ilm al-kalam, and looking at the application of fiqh in different contemporary contexts. Now, if I walk into a madrasa and I say, teach my child, and they teach my child, and after 12 years I say, but you didn't teach my child what I wanted you to teach my child. You ended up teaching my child is a hafiz, but he doesn't understand the Quran. Or my child understands the Quran as a hafiz, but he's not applying it to contemporary issues. It's because we had different educational values and perspectives that we didn't make explicit, and therefore we thought we're teaching naturally, but we didn't realize that you can't do everything in the same span of time. So, similarly, you can take another example, educating parents, parents who are educating their children. Every moment is an educational moment, right? And every one of us is an educator by default. Whether you're speaking to your parents or your children or your loved ones or your neighbor, there's a moment of education happening. Now, how you approach those conversations, we'll go back to my son's example. He asks me for something, and I would respond and maybe do it for him. Somebody else would say, no, let him do it for himself. Those are different pedagogies. My pedagogy, my educational philosophy is to support his learning by doing things collaboratively. Somebody else's pedagogy is, no, let him learn his independence. Now, my pedagogy might say his independence will come over time, and somebody else will say, no, at the age of 4, he should learn to be independent. He should learn to tie his shoelaces on his own. Those are two different pedagogies. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, as natural as we make things to be, and there's plenty of examples like this, there are going to be distinctions on how we would approach the learning process. And for us as educators or parents, it's very important to articulate what our educational position is, what I'm calling pedagogy, but what's our educational position, right? Because how will you select a school? How will you support a school unless you know what their position is on teaching? Not just on curriculum.
Yeah, Jazakallah. That's what's the most important thing. Now, along with this, the same thing that when we see that there should be a values and pedagogy, and now the question is coming in all over especially the Muslim community is facing these issues. They are saying they are living, for example, in Australia, you are living in Adelaide, in the suburb somewhere, who is living in a Murray Bridge in between Melbourne and Adelaide, somewhere in the suburbs, and they don't have Islamic schools there. They don't have a public schools there. And if they come up that why not we go for the homeschooling, and this topic of homeschooling is coming very commonly used, that why not we go for, what do you feel that what are the benefits, challenges, opportunities for this homeschooling thing, and which age group do you feel that this homeschooling is beneficial, and where it comes in little of a danger zone, and especially challenge comes sometime when the parents are not very much educated, especially about that numeracy and standard of numeracy. They don't have that much standard. But do you feel that at least the danger which they will get in a public schools or in a environment, outside environment, at least they will be preserved, their values will be preserved if they are in engaged themselves in a homeschooling?
Yeah, I think, okay, let's say we agree, all of us agree, inshallah, that all schools, let's say all public schools, they're not the same, right? We would all agree that every public school is distinct. It might have the same standardized curriculum, but it might be doing things in different ways. And every teacher will approach learning in different ways. Similarly, every Islamic school is not the same. Some Islamic schools, like I mentioned earlier with the Quran example, will approach things in very different ways. And in the same manner, then homeschools or home education is also not the same. And it really depends on how you are approaching home education. Some people will approach home education like a homeschool. They'll take the standardized curriculum, the standardized textbook, set up a table, chairs, have a schedule for their children, and say, this is school at home. Others will say, we are going to do nothing that you would do at school, and we're going to educate you in a way that's completely different. You'll be, you'll go on field trips all day. You'll have no schedule. You'll wake up when you want. You'll go to sleep when you want, and you will learn to sort of be you'll have an emergent, what's called an emergent curriculum. Very different approach. And there's multiple approaches like this, multiple philosophies. So again, going back to why this has become a science is because it's not the same. And there's so many different ways of looking at this. So Mufti Saab, to answer your question about about homeschooling and its benefits and its challenges, it really depends on how you approach home education, homeschooling. It can be approached in many different ways by different people, depending on their educational values. My recommendation to most parents who ask a question like that is to first determine your own educational values as parents. And what you often find is that the husband and the wife themselves don't have the same educational values. They won't necessarily agree. Just the example I gave you about Luqman and tying his shoelaces, right? I mean, the question becomes, do the parent, when something goes wrong, when a child says, I want that chocolate, right, before dinner, the father will say, absolutely, have it, go for it, in some cases, and the mother will say, absolutely not. Those are two very different educational perspectives, right? So the parents need to come, and I'm just using a simple example, but the parents need to come together first in understanding what their approach to education is. They need to align on that approach. And then after aligning on their approach, then they determine what that homeschool will look like, or what that, if they have an access to an Islamic school or a public school that they prefer, what that education will look like. So it's really about first coming to an alignment on your educational values and your perspectives first, before deciding what the type of schooling model will be that you'll lean toward.
But the question is really that how we my first question will be, then I'll come to my second one. How really we will decide the education values being a parent? Like, for example, first we sit together and we decide that what will be the education values.
Yeah. So for example, I ask, my wife and I, we have this conversation, and I've encouraged other parents to have the conversation. The first question you ask is, what's important to you for your child? So I ask, this is what's important to me. I want my child to, so for example, what's important to me, I would say I want my child to be able to, learn certain sports. I want them to be able to have a strong understanding of who they are from their Islamic perspective. My wife might say something different. She might say, I want my child to become a hafiz. So we have two different, so we have to come to that alignment first, because if my approach is, I want him to be, I want him to, let's say, go to the masjid regularly and just be among good people, and my wife has a different goal, what's important to us needs to align first. We have to come to an agreement on what that is. The second question, so first we talk about what's important. The second thing that we ask ourselves often is, what educational experiences influenced my upbringing? So we ask ourselves again, what educational experiences have influenced our upbringing? So I say to myself, for example, I had these types of moments in my upbringing really helped shape who I am. And my wife would say, this is the types of things that help shape who I am. And two very different perspectives, because we had two very different upbringings, right? So for example, she would say, I grew up in a very strict family, and we did things on time when they were meant to be. And I said, I grew up in a very flexible family where things were done when I felt like they could be done. And as a result, we have two very different. So again, you ask some of these basic but foundational questions to make explicit what's important to us. The reason why this is so important is because then when you send your child to a homeschool, you do homeschooling, or when you send your child to an Islamic school or a public school, wherever you send your child, you know what you're looking for. You know what you want your child to gain, because you've clarified it internally of what you're looking for. You're not disappointed in the end because you planned it, right? So similarly for homeschool, it can be an amazing experience for some, can be very challenging for others, as can an Islamic school, as can a public school, right?
So it means that you gave me the answer of one of my very initial questions, that like being a husband and wife, we have to decide our values. Same in a national curriculum, first we have to decide, being a nation or being a community, our values. Then we come up with the pedagogy and the curriculum and all these things. First we decide the values, and then we will come up with sort of a things that if, but if our values are 180-degree to different values, so definitely we cannot unify the things. So first
Very
we
good
have
point.
to come, we have to come up and just sit together, all stakeholders sit together. Let's decide that what is our ideology, what we really want, what we really want to preserve, what we want to get enhanced, what are the values in terms of national values, religious values, what. That's good, Jazakallah. Another,
Absolutely, and just wanted to add to that because that's a very good point. And going back to your question about language, then, if it's not a national value to make Urdu a national, central language, then Urdu will always become secondary.
yeah, even
So
the third one, sometimes the
even the
third one.
yes, so you have Arabic, Urdu, and English, and and you're right, have the debate at the values level. How central is this language? Is the importance of this language? Because if it's not of a central value, then you can anticipate Urdu and Arabic will become add-ons when we're able to do it.
Yeah, yeah,
We'll
that's
become
most important thing. We normally consume our lot of time about how we will do rather than doing a what we really want. So the first important thing is when we decide that what we really want. Okay. Now another question is coming about the pedagogy about the screen. Someone asked that in a pedagogy we normally use that we has to inculcate the creative thinking, critical thinking in our students. So how should we balance impacting critical thinking with being a not too critical of the Islamic fundamentals? Because can there be a limit for that? Because when you open this door of criticism, so anyone can come and he can criticize that. Oh, I really don't like the methodology which some of Sahabas they used or some of things they did. And there's an open door because they can go anybody. They can criticize anyone. So when we open, how we will balance it? How we will balance this critical thinking, especially, and with being not too much critical of the Islamic fundamentals. Can there be a limit? How teacher will limit it?
um, this is a very good question. And this is exactly the problem between the debate in teacher-centered and student-centered learning. Because we assume that one is better than the other. We used to do teacher-centered learning, rote learning in madrasas. We do a lot of sort of just memorization, and there isn't enough critical thinking. It's like it's either or. It's not an either or. And the richness in our Islamic tradition, in education in particular, is that there has to be the balance between between two, right? The study of mantiq, of logic, was an essential science, in Islamic educational contexts. But you would learn mantiq, you'd learn logic first, and then you'd learn logic, then you'd learn rhetoric, how to articulate yourself, and then you would do criticism. You'd have inquiry. But we now today are going on the assumption that you can do critical thinking in the absence of learning logic. So
Yeah.
the reason why student-centered learning is so problematic is because it assumes that anything goes. Students can just ask questions and just assume that any criticism is a worthy criticism. It's not. Every criticism, every constructive approach, every inquiry has to come from a certain foundation. So you can't do without one or the other. You have to have certain foundations of thinking before you can ask those types of questions. Which is why I think it's very important to have a combination of establishing the fundamentals, and then you open it up for inquiry. There's a really good chapter which I can forward to you to share with the people who are listening, called it's in the line of it's about Islamic education, and it's about whether are there limits to critical inquiry in Islamic education, and inshallah I'll share it with you. But it emphasizes the same idea that yes, we want to encourage inquiry, yes, we want to encourage critical thinking, and yes, we want to encourage them in asking very important questions. But at the same time, it has to come with a foundation. You have to learn how to ask questions. You have to learn how to how to think through your own answer before asking them. Because if it's a logical fallacy, then why would you ask it, right? If you don't have the foundations of aqidah, for example, then how can you ask questions that require an aqidah foundation first? A foundational, fundamental belief of an Islamic worldview of our belief system to then be able to ask the question. So it's not to say that you shouldn't ask questions, and it's not to say that there are no limits or there's limits. It's to say, have we established the foundation first of how to
Yeah.
think?
So it means
And
that you
and sorry, just one more thing. Even outside of the Islamic tradition, learning how to think was a very foundational science, not just in the Islamic tradition. Even if you look at the IB curriculum, the International Baccalaureate curriculum, there's a theory of knowledge in the higher grades, but
yeah.
there is a process of learning how to think. And we've removed that whole study of how to critically think. We just started doing critical thinking.
Yeah, there's one of there were very good books, and all the curriculums also about especially the theory of knowledge with the thing. And so it means that correct is that first we teach them that discipline, how to ask question, and to decide that what are the perspectives should be there, what is the basic foundation should be there. Then we allow this thing, so it will resolve the issues. Jazakallah. Now, I'm coming end of the time. Now, most important thing that what are the three most challenges, issues, topics that Muslim communities in the West are struggling to reconcile with Muslim students or youth? What should we in Pakistan do to deal with the same? Because you know what, the problem is coming. The wavelength is not matched. The parents are out of the they are not allowing them out of the box. They want to be in the same, and they are coming with the same thing. Oh no, in our time we used to do this, and you people are doing this. So now this challenge, connectivity of the wavelength, what do you feel, what are the challenges and how we resolve these challenges? Because you are living in in a city like that, you're in a country where we are facing this, our youth especially, sometimes they feel problem.
Yeah, I think it's again a very good question. Some of the major challenges I think that we're experiencing are around atheism, definitely around atheism. Many young people are questioning the existence of God, of Allah. Many young people are leaving Islam, and leaving Islam without much understanding of why. They get influenced by very um, substandard readings and thought that's out there. It's very undeveloped. But atheism is a problem. Sexuality is probably the second problem. And what I mean by sexuality is LGBTQ, gay, lesbian discourse and discussions, and sexuality in general is a problem for, especially in Islamic schools. And I think the third is just a sense of identity, in the sense of being Muslim. Let's say in this case being Pakistani, and in other cases Canadian or American or Australian, but that shared identity, feeling a sense of pride, and I think those are probably the three. Is sexuality, identity, and atheism are probably three of the major challenges. And I think the way that we've been responding to this, or Islamic schools in the West and in Australia and Canada and other places have been trying to respond to this, is by being more proactive, through deeper engagement of the needs of learners. I think it's very, very important to listen to the voices of young people, and the things that they're experiencing, and supporting that journey that they're on. So in many ways, it's about adapting the way we teach Islam, the way we approach Islam, in a way that is responsive to their needs. Children won't, students, young people nowadays won't be as receptive if you open a book on Sirah and you try to teach them the Sirah, unless they see the relevance of it. But if you can show them the relevance of it first, and then you open the book of Sirah, the way that they approach it will be completely different. So going again back between that interplay between teacher-centered and student-centered, if you begin with the student-centered inquiry and say, you have a question of inquiry, something related to COVID, something related to Black Lives Matters, something related to, sort of contemporary issues that are happening globally. And there's an Islamic school that I work closely with, and a friend of mine is the principal there, and he started doing these inquiry-based questions across all grades, and from a young age. And one of the I think it was grade 1 class, the grade 1 or the grade 2 class, their inquiry question was, does COVID-19 affect us all in the same way? Now, does COVID-19 affect us all in the same way? No, but what does that mean? It means some of us have parents who've lost their jobs. Some of us have uncles or aunts or grandparents who've passed away. Some of us are not being affected at all. It doesn't affect us all the same way in any location that we're in, but it gets young people asking questions. Now, based on that, if you now bring in aspects of the seerah, or you bring in hadith related to differences, diversities, people at different levels, supporting, giving sadaqah to those that are in need. If you bring those in, suddenly they're more willing to listen now, because the question of inquiry was about differences in relation to COVID, which they are all living through and experiencing. But suddenly their mind is open to the fact that we are not all the same, and we don't all have access to the same things. So Luqman and I, my son and I, were having a conversation the other day. We were reading a book about sadaqah and giving sadaqah and zakat both. And I was trying to explain to him the concept of zakat and why we give zakat. And he couldn't understand initially that not everyone has the same number of toys as he does. In his mind, everyone, if I have toys, everyone has toys. And helping him understand that the reason we give zakat is so that we can help others. We can try to some extent respond to the imbalance that we have. Now, if I was to teach him, hadith related to zakat or Quranic ayats related to zakat, he'd be far more willing to listen, right? So again, I think it's very important to be responsive to these challenges that we have, and to preempt them as best as we can before they come up.
Any last, my humble question that will be, when you mentioned these three challenges, any good material available for respond these three challenges properly, with any guidelines for the teachers? Because we are facing the same things, not the it might be a weightage is different, like in Western Pakistan, but yes, absolutely, these are the three challenges which the youth is facing especially. So any material which you can guide, which you can mention, which you can intimate that this material is good for the teachers, they go through, that would have discussed these challenges especially.
There's a lot out there. I'd have to think a little bit about specific ones. There's a book. There's a really good book by a brother in the United States named Habib Qadri. And I think the book's title is The War Within Our Hearts. The War Within Our Hearts.
Wonderful.
And it's a book. He's a dynamic, mashallah, amazing school principal of an Islamic school in Chicago. And him and his brother, I think Habib Qadri and Saad Qadri, have written this book. And I think there's a series of books that are about Muslim youth identity, about all of these issues that we just mentioned. But they're designed for young people to read. There's many more like that. I have to think a little bit about some of the other ones, but I think that's a good start, inshallah.
Jazakallah. Thank you very much. And time is very short, but we hope, inshallah, we will sit together again. And we have a lot of questions are there, a lot of questions people are asking, but we don't have a time. We're running out of the time. So, inshallah, Jazakumullah Ahsanal Jaza. Thank you very much. Precious time we spent, alhamdulillah. And next time, inshallah, we will meet with Luqman Hakim also, because so much mentioned. Inshallah. In next episode, we'll meet with him, inshallah, also. So,
Inshallah.
Jazakallah, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Keep in touch and also provide us that article about the critical thinking also. And if you can just provide us, especially that about the group, these are the books which you are mentioning. So, inshallah. Thank you very much. Jazakallah.
Jazakallah khairan.
Assalamu alaikum
Wayakum.
wa
Alaikum
rahmatullahi
salam.
wa barakatuhu. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala save you from all this evil. Jazakallah. Jazakallah.
Amin.
Assalamu alaikum.